I think this has got a great chemistry to it, this meeting, so I'd like to congratulate the organisers. Now, we're running slightly behind time, so I will canter through this. But what I want to do in the next 20 minutes is to try to convince you that we will not innovate as healthcare professionals unless we are much better at embracing the information age. We are the last major industry that hasn't adopted the technical advances of information technology, and we really need to do that. So that's what I'm going to try and convince you about. So let's go. So what I'm going to talk about, one of my roles is to act as sort of locum chief scientist in Scotland. So I want to talk to you about how we've tried to gear an entire country for stratified medicine research. Secondly, demonstrate that informatics is a catalyst for change and innovation. And demonstrate that through one or two case studies, mostly focused on diabetes, but then talk about life beyond diabetes. But before I do that, I thought I'd take you back to the birth of the NHS, because we're all very proud of it. This is Nye Bevan in Trafford General Hospital. That's where they launched it. Some people claim this is Mrs. Thatcher in the bed, listening, and Hattie Jakes just... and he said, quite the most ambitious adventure in the care of national health that any country has ever seen. And we all subscribe to that. It's outlived 14 prime ministers, soon to be 15 maybe. So that was in 1948. And what I would argue is that something just as important, but on a much smaller scale, in 1948 was happening in this place. Does anyone know where that is? There's a clue. Okay, it's not the White House. It's the most famous epidemiological study anywhere. Pardon? Well, almost not the nurses, but somewhat. Framingham, fantastic. This is Framingham Town Hall in Massachusetts, 30 miles due west of Boston. And it was in 1948 that all 5,200 town residents subscribed to regular health checks. There are now 3 generations of participants. It's truly iconic. And I would argue it was the first time that citizens came together with scientists and healthcare providers to do something very special. So the theme of Framingham is one of collaboration over many years. And if you go to the, what did Framingham tell us? Oh dear, is that my hearing aid, or can you? Thank you. Framingham told us about risk factors, high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and the intimate links to heart attack and stroke. And Claude Lafont, who was president of the NIH, suggested Framingham has resulted in an extra 4 extra years of life. Isn't that a fantastic thought from 5,000 people? Do you know these risk equations we type into our computer to predict the absolute risk over the next 10 years? Those quadratic equations are derived from Framingham. So if you log on to the Framingham Civic website, they say with classical American modesty, we are the town that changed America's heart. If you log on to the Dundee website, you find out what time your bins are to be emptied. So it's very different. But we have a new horizon, and the new horizon is the human genome. And I like this quote by Martin Bobrow from the Wellcome Trust. It's the map of 3 billion letters. It's like being at the top of a mountain pass, seeing in front of you a fertile plain, rich with new ideas and methods, which will clarify concepts for understanding the complexity of human disease. And that is what the genome will offer. But I think his quote could have been improved if he'd said, and informatics is fundamental to the success of this revolution in science. And I've just said that today here at Hayek. So what we're trying to do in Scotland, and I think this also would be appropriate for the philosophy of the Hayek, what we're trying to do is bridge between world-class patient care, between the final common path of translational medicine and clinical trials, with excellence in life sciences. Because classically, it takes at least 15 years for basic science discovery to actually make it to the make it to the clinic. So what we want to do is to concertina that journey. And what we're trying to do is use informatics as a key catalyst to drive that bridging process. So Scotland, has anyone ever been to Scotland? Oh, great. I see you sort of being southern Scotland, I must say. So we have a Scotland population of 5 million. We still have a single healthcare provider. We're very fortunate. High rates of morbidity. But what we've done is collaborate across our 5 million. And I think the Northwest has a superb opportunity to get the systems right, because 5 million is a good denominator. It's possible. You can get everyone with an interest in a subject into a room, and it's a small room. So I think your size is in your favor. And we also have a unique patient identifier. So coming from Scotland, this is our view of the world. Someone asked me, is that a map of the UK adjusted for intellectual capacity? So are there any Welsh people in the house? Because Wales has disappeared. So what is this informatics to support patient care? And the key to it, and we, as healthcare professionals, we should be enforcing this. We use a unique patient identifier for every episode of healthcare, wherever you are across the network. And this is my number. So this is my date of birth. It's a big week for me last week. Sex. Some people thought there were 5 sexes in Scotland, so I have to say no. Muir said to me, is that marks out of 10? I said, and I checked to make sure it's valid. So what that allows us to do is link data across the journey of care. And that was the theme of Muir's presentation. The other thing is you need to define the currency, and for 15 years now we locked ourselves in a darkened room to define the currency of care. So if we're sharing data, we define its meaning and its coding, and we've done that across all the chronic diseases, and I think that is absolutely vital. So what we did was we embraced healthcare, IT, technology, and then the internet came along. We did it locally. But in Scotland now, we have a single network, a single clinical information system for every person with diabetes in Scotland, 27,000 people, and it links into every general practice on a nightly basis. There are about 1,200 of them, and is used in all 38 hospitals. So we use clinical information across the country. So wherever a patient is seen, they have their up-to-date record at the point of care where there is a legitimate clinical relationship. And that shows it schematically here. So GP systems, hospital systems, pharmacy, laboratories, etc. And it's a great clinical tool. So in my clinic on a Monday, these are fictitious, I can log on to my patients. I can see their biochemistry over time. I can see their prescribing, which is actually a view of the primary care prescribing record. I can see what the podiatrist has done, the specialist nurse has done. I can see the retinal images. And the good news is that since implementation, objective criteria are that we're measuring key facets of care on over 95% of every person with diabetes in Scotland annually. And we published this in a survey. It's been going 10 years. So for example, digital retinopathy screening, we now hit about 82% of the entire diabetic population annually. So I can see, very importantly, that although there are more patients, sight-threatening retinopathy or blindness has gone down 43% over the last 6 years. So really meaningful criteria. And we can actually see across Scotland where the people with visual impairment lie. For large vessel disease, a 40% reduction in amputation. So the information starts with the patient, because that's what it's all about. That's why we're all here. But by using it judiciously, you get great data out, which actually are meaningful to patients and meaningful to professionals. And we were delighted. This is Mark Walport, Chief Executive of the Wellcome Trust. If you live in Dundee and suffer from diabetes, you've recently been taking part in a medical revolution, which was very kind of him to say. I only gave him a tenner, so I thought that was really good. But there's a data model here, if you get it right, because what we've talked about is live NHS data linkage from general practice, community, clinics, hospitals, but then through good governance and anonymization, those data have immense secondary value for research and patient benefit. And it was actually David Cooksey in the Cooksey report who first highlighted the role of informatics in translational medicine, because if you look at the journey from basic research through to clinical use, there's a whole host of disciplines which are vital if we're going to make that journey. And actually, we've put insufficient emphasis on informatics in both healthcare, but also in translational medicine. So, if I've got time, just one or two quick case studies. Can we use the same information for clinical trials? Who here is a clinical trialist or participates in trials? Does anyone do that? One or two people? So what we did is put a national research network on top of the clinical information system led by Graham, Shona, and John. So this is basically the whole of Scotland. So we have the National Diabetes Register, but we use the same information to check feasibility for studies. And by recruiting up front onto a research register, our recruitment rates to studies have gone up significantly. So currently, about 10,000 patients are on this research register, and people are really helpful with research. About 70% of people agree to the principle of participating in research. And the benefits of this are that only eligible patients are approached, screen failure rate is decreased, recruitment rate increases, and importantly, dead patients are not contacted, because we've all heard of sorry tales of inappropriate correspondence. So in my clinic, there's actually a research functionality on the clinical information system. I can then screen those people who have said, we will participate in trials, and it works. Here's a quick case study. A cardiovascular outcome study, they said we want 10 patients in 18 months. We hit our target in 2 weeks. Device study, they said, can you get 40 patients within a month? We recruited 40 patients in 2 days. And a genetics study, we wrote out to 25 people, 24 took part, and the remaining patient turned up and said, can I take part? So get the information structure right, and it has immense power for research. And our portfolio, I won't dwell on this, but we're seeing year-on-year increase in recruitment into commercial and academic studies, and we have now income generated about 10 to 15 million pounds to Scotland from industrial studies, which we didn't have previously. Secondly, drug safety, and I'll go through this quickly. Glitazones, have you heard of those? Rosiglitazone, under the cloud because of coronary vascular disease, but we wanted to say, do they increase the risk of fracture? Because in the clinical trials, there was a suggestion that these drugs increased fracture rates, especially in women. Okay? But if you go to the data sheet, for example, the Takeda data sheet, it said it's not important because most are in the upper arm, hand, and foot. But I would argue they were not powered to look at large fractures. So what we wanted to do is ask that very important question, was there an increased risk in men? But also, is there an increased risk of hip and spine fracture? And because we've got nationwide data, 238,000 people with diabetes, we link it to the hospitalization database of all hip fractures. We came up with 11,000 fractures in this period. One can look at the attributable risk of glitazones and fracture. So it's population-based drug safety. The design is very complex because of confounding by indication, but the bottom line is that these drugs double your risk, this pointers, double your risk of hip fracture. And we estimate that about 10% of all hip fractures in the diabetic population are due to these drugs. Again, using routine data that we all collect for really important public health issues. Lastly, life sciences and pharmacogenetics. This is going on to the genomic revolution. Because over the years, about 40,000 people locally have consented for DNA to be used anonymously and linked to electronic health records. And the good thing for the UK is they can't do this in the United States because of the fragmented healthcare system. So this is David Altshuler from Harvard saying the outstanding longitudinal tracking you have in place will add considerable information. There is no doubt that a resource like this is desperately needed. So we've recruited about 40,000 people across. So that's about every 10th person you see in Dundee is in this study. So the support has been phenomenal. And we've worked with world leaders. Do you know these guys? This is Mark McCarthy on the right from Oxford. This is Andrew Hattersley, great speaker for next year, from Exeter. I love this picture. It's as if his mother's patting him on his head, saying, don't drink too much. So So we've been part of the sort of genetic revolution. So there are now about 38 common genes we've discovered for type 2 diabetes, whereas in 2009 there were only 2. So this has really been exponential in our genetic knowledge. The challenges, however, are translating this into clinical utility. So can we advance clinical management? And an area, just to give you a snapshot of, is pharmacogenetics, okay? An old professor of clinical pharmacology used to say to me, give a drug to 10 people. It works in 3. It doesn't work in 3 others. 3 don't take it, and 1 has an adverse event. And actually, current prescribing isn't that far away from that. When I give you an antihypertensive, I actually don't know if it's going to work. So what we're trying to do is use genetic information to tease out this variance. And we use something called metformin. Remember, very common used drug in diabetes. What we basically did is do a genome-wide scan to say what genes influence metformin therapeutic response in terms of A1C reduction. This is some stuff we published in Nature Genetics because we came up with a gene locus we were very surprised at because it's actually well-known in cancer circles called ATM. And the key thing is now is that metformin, a drug commonly used in diabetes, is now being used for its potential benefit in cancer because of these types of studies. Okay, have I got 2 more minutes, David? Is that okay? So I think that's given you a flavor of the use of information which can drive quality of care, but can also drive research. So I just want to look beyond diabetes. So we're doing this for a whole host of common diseases, but we're also doing it for families. So this is a Framingham type study called Generation Scotland. We've recruited 24,000 people from 5,000 families. The largest family size is 32 people, very large family. And we've got all these very detailed data, which we can now link to genetic information. But I wanted to come back to high-performance computing in the NHS. Where are we going wrong? You know, this was predicted. These are in the BMJ a few years ago. NPFit, a spiraling disaster, says the BMA. Anatomy of a £15 billion gamble. And just last week, 12 billion NHS computer system is scrapped, and it's all your money that Labour poured down the drain. Classical Daily Mail headline. So I said, why did it go wrong? And I had to look to my favourite journal, the London Evening Standard, because Richard Granger, the NHS computer chief, failed his computer studies exam. And I did laugh because it was his mother who had revealed that the man had failed his exams at Bristol University. So this is challenging stuff, okay? Why? High number of heterogeneous data sets, clinical process is complex, the nature of the data, it's not that voluminous compared with other industries, but it's richer. Governance is challenging, but we need to sort this. And if you look internationally, we can learn what works. If you go to the Mayo, Duke, Intermountain, they've got open innovation for e-health. So they have the academic, the provider, the NHS, and the commercial sector working together in an experimental way, shared risk, shared reward. And I think this is a model we need to look at. So in your Hayek, think about how you innovate in e-health by getting those relationships right. And that's certainly something that we did about 5 years ago. We said, we need to do that. So the university and the NHS actually created a company. And we brought in high-performance computing from the finance sector to do this, okay, to build ground-up, clinically-led, healthcare-led, managerially-led services. And basically it uses all the data which is in every health system and joins it together in a patient stream. So it doesn't throw anything away, it abstracts, it normalizes, it integrates it, and it puts apps on the top on this very rich information platform. So what can you do? You can join up an entire health system in real time. So we feed in at 15-minute intervals to a population of 900,000 people. And then you can abstract the information that you need as a professional, which will be different from your neighbor, using services tailored to your requirements. To show you that, so it's sort of, it's an information domain with multiple services. So just give you a flavor of that, dashboards in every ward, updated 15-minute intervals. We've not had MRSA in a hospital for 2 years now. view trends over time. You can drill down, you can put SPC charts on it. So I'm rushing through this because of time. Cancer pathways, you can actually look at the entire pathway, regardless if they're in primary, secondary, tertiary care, radiotherapy, and actually click on the patient or the stage of the pathway and see where they are, wherever they've been seen in the system. So you can, these are fictitious, but these are patients. You can see the pathology results. You can see when they're due for radiology. You can map them to their outpatient appointment. So you've got patient-centered and detailed data. So that's the approach we're taking across Scotland, because we think that the health service will not survive unless we reduce waste, variation, and harm in our systems. And the only way to do that is to have information that's valid and real time. So we've got to get rid of this issue, because there are systematic approach to good governance. But currently, access to data, because of a culture of caution, suspicion, is arguably the biggest hurdle. There are information governance and privacy enhancing technology approaches, and we've sort of looked at that nationally through the Wellcome Trust funded SHIP program. So I'll just finish. So to conclude, David, I hope I've convinced you that health informatics can be a catalyst for translation across boundaries and a driver for innovation. It's not only about care, it's trials, safety, proof of biology, scientific translation, and patient stratification. This was the sunrise in Dundee this morning. I was just going. So where are we going to go for the next few years on this? And I would challenge the Northwest. You've got some great stuff going on at Salford in this, but let's rally around it and make it systematic around the Northwest. Because I think Northwest and Scotland could be the exemplars of this for the United Kingdom. However, the only place where success comes before work is in a dictionary. I really like that, but then I saw, oh, it's a hairdresser who said it. So I thought I'd look to North America for some inspiration. Do you remember Dan Quayle? He said, if we do not succeed, then we run the risk of failure. So I wasn't inspired. So I went back to the great man who said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And currently in the health system, particularly down here because of all these votes in the House of Lords, there's a bit of a vacuum. But I think that vacuums are great to allow local level leadership to flourish. And I think you should get ahead and do this stuff. So thank you very much for listening. It's a pleasure to be here.